Good evening. Welcome everyone who's joining us. Thanks for everyone who showed up tonight. We have a good sized group here tonight. And for those who are or will join us on Facebook Live, and those who will eventually watch on YouTube or wherever else this might wind up being, we pray that you'd be blessed and that we would all grow closer in our walk with Jesus. If you are in Western New York, come on out and join us on Wednesday evenings at River Life Chapel and Christ Life. Do this weekly Bible study at 6 p.m. on Wednesday evenings at 3474 Creek Road in Youngstown, New York. And if you are in Western New York and don't have a home church, we invite you to come out Sunday mornings at 10:30. Same address, Youngstown, New York, River Life Chapel. So we've already prayed, so we'll get into Job chapter 41. God discusses Leviathan. So last week we did Behemoth, and that was a behemoth of a study. But Leviathan will be even a bigger study. More debate. We will not resolve age-old questions as to exactly what the Leviathan is. We probably will have a little fun talking about it. We've got scorecards that, like we did last week for for Behemoth, with possibilities, and as we get to each description of the Leviathan, we'll check off on the said that the first section is Job 41, 1 through 7. Basically, Job, can you contend with Leviathan? How do you want to contend with me? That's what God's saying. Basically, Job, you don't want to mess with Leviathan. Why in the world do you want to mess with me? Basically is what God's saying. So I'm going to read some notes before we get into the verses. Basically, Leviathan, by definition, the Strong's definition for Leviathan is a wreathed or twisted animal, i.e. a serpent, especially the crocodile or some other large sea monster. Figuratively, the constellation of the dragon, also as a symbol of Babylon. One of the commentators says a type of Egyptian and Babylonian tyrants, and there's some scriptures, Psalm 104:26 and Isaiah 27:1. One of those at least we'll touch on in a little bit. He goes on to say a poetical generalization for all cetacean, serpentine, and saurian monsters. I don't have any idea if I pronounced those right. Hence, all the description applies to no one animal, especially the crocodile, which is naturally described after the river horse, as both are found in the Nile. So this commentator is basically saying the natural assumption, it's a crocodile, which is often spoken of in relation to the hippopotamus. So because they're both Nile animals, is his leaning on this. Again, if you study the Leviathan, you're going to get more opinions than what I bring out tonight from different people. I mean, we don't want to miss the main thing, which is, Job, you don't dare mess with this animal. How can you possibly demand an audience with me?
Or is it a real?
Well, that's another possibility. Is it a real animal? So we'll read some of I got a few more things from commentators we're going to read. I tend to believe it was a real animal. But let's look at what some of the other commentators say. Another one says, usually Leviathan is considered to be a mythical sea monster or dragon that terrorized sailors and fishermen. Yet, in the context of Job 41, God does not seem to consider Leviathan to be mythical at all. Some believe that Leviathan describes some ancient dragon-like dinosaur that either survived to Job's day. Others consider that in this context, Leviathan is nothing more than a mighty crocodile. Okay, so there's, from one guy, one commentator, you got opinions from dinosaur to crocodile. And so...
He hasn't made up his mind.
Yeah, he hasn't made up his mind. He's also the one I disagreed with when it came to his assessment of Elihu, but, anyhow. It's, I heard a joke. I'll just adapt it a little bit. If you get two Bible scholars in a room, you're for sure going to get three opinions. So, I am not mocking scholars. I'm not mocking scholars. Without Bible scholars, we'd have no English translations. And I wouldn't be able to read the Bible because I don't read Greek or Hebrew or any of the other languages that the Bible was written in. So I'm not downing, I'm not mocking scholars, but it's true, as you can see, just from the one guy, you got anything from an ancient dinosaur dragon thing to a crocodile. So anyhow, another commentator, whether this Leviathan be a whale or a crocodile is a great dispute amongst the learned, which I will not undertake to determine. Some of the particulars agree more easily with one or the other. So there's another theologian who ranges it from whale to crocodile. All righty, so I got one more. This one I actually asked my Hebrew scholar friend, and this was part of his response to me. The key thing is to know that it is both the behemoth and the Leviathan, reflected of a real-world monsters and is used as an image for the anti-creational forces at work in the world. As the first, God reigns sovereign over it and can send it like a puppy to get his profit. As the second, it is a figure of the great world-ending, world-renewing conflict coming at the end of the age. That great serpent of old shall fall as with his instruments in pagan anti-God kings waging war against the nations of the earth. So he's saying is both a legitimate beast of some kind. I think he used the term monster. And it's prophetically, images prophetically the end of the world and what's coming. And I'll refer back to these as we go on. The Leviathan is spoken of a couple more, well, actually, I think at least three more times outside of Job, but one doesn't really give any description of it. So Psalm 74:14 says, "Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness." Okay, so first thing on our checklist, we might as well do it while we're here, the second to last one, Psalm 74:14 tells us Leviathan has heads, more than one. So check off whatever you think.
Does it have more than one head?
No, put a check on what you think might have more than one head.
Which animal?
Which animal? So this little checklist is just for fun. We're going to go through all the descriptions and see, you take it home and decide for yourself what you think it is, and you can have two or three opinions just like the scholars if you want. We're not going to miss the main point by having some fun here with Leviathan. All right, the other verse, that gives a description of Leviathan is Isaiah 27:1, and it says, "In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea." So, the last one on our checklist, piercing serpent. So Isaiah describes him as a piercing, crooked serpent dragon. All right, so you can use the scorecard and pick off the ones that you think it might or could be. Piercing serpent.
Mine says he will kill the dragon, that he's not a dragon.
What?
My translation says he will kill the dragon. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about the Lord. Never mind.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
This is one thing I heard from a video a while ago, but apparently the word dragon is kind of a new thing compared to like the Bible. Like they've had kind of dinosaur, and the word dragon is kind of a more modern thing that kind of separates dinosaurs and dragons into two different categories.
Could be. I think.
So like it's kind of like the way he described it was dragon. Like dragons are always dinosaurs, but dinosaurs are not always dragons.
That could make sense. I mean, that could make sense. Just like what's the one I always use for that? All pennies are coins, but not all coins are pennies. So that could make sense that way. I'm just trying to think. I think in the King James, the word dragon is used, so that can't be that modern. It may be a modern distinction.
Because what I thought it was that dinosaur was like a more modern term with like science and all that.
Yeah. Dinosaur didn't come, that word didn't come around, I think, until 1841, I think.
Andy might be right where it's dinosaur.
I could be wrong on the date, but a lot of people, badmouth, well, the Bible can't be true. It doesn't even mention dinosaurs. Well, it's kind of hard to mention dinosaur when the word didn't exist when it was written.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I just had to
here we got two attributes of Leviathan. We haven't even got into Job yet. All right. Somebody want to read verses 1 through 7?
Will?
All right.
Okay. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make supplications to you, or will he speak to you soft words? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him for a servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you bind him for your maidens? Will the traders bargain over him? Will they divide him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So, verse 1, God moves on from the behemoth to the Leviathan. Last week we looked at the behemoth. It just comes to mind. Remember, when you're reading the Bible, there was no chapter and verse numbers originally.
I saw it.
I'm glad they're there because it sure makes things easy to look up. But you don't want to stop and say, oh, I'm done with chapter 40. Here in church, Pastor the last couple of weeks has mentioned God built in a cliffhanger. So he gets to the end of the chapter and an unanswered question is left open. And he just called it a cliffhanger. So, just be aware, these are artificially inserted. They use some logic to make it happen, and I'm glad they're there, but when God rolls on from Behemoth to Leviathan, he didn't put his pen and paper down, say, okay, it's the end of the chapter, we can wait and, So anyhow, so he moves on to Leviathan, and basically verse 1 says, Job, can you control Leviathan? Can you draw him out with a hook or his tongue with a cord? Which, can you control him? Verse 2.
Well, we know it's not a fish. Because if it was a fish, you could have pulled him out with a fish hook.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'll down one column.
I don't even know if I had that in there. I mainly stuck with descriptions of the animal itself. So, but yeah, you can use those scorecards any way you want. All right. So verse 2, can you put a hook into his nose or bore his jaw through with a thorn? One of the commentators, hook is rather a rope of rushes, and thorn is rather a ring or a hook, the way wild beasts are led around. So you can put a hook through an ox's nose or something like that and lead the beast around. And most animals, if you whack them on the nose, you're more likely to survive, because for most animals, the nose is a sensitive spot. I mean, I've heard that with sharks, you hit them on the nose. Right. I've heard it with bears, and, I've heard it.
Even with sheep.
Even with sheep. So I've heard, we won't tell that story. You can tell it later. The goat.
I could be wrong, but you think of bulls in the arena.
Yeah.
Didn't they put the Romans for some? I don't know if the Romans did, but I remember seeing something about that.
Probably the matadors in Spain, probably,
right.
Because they got to lead the bull to the
Right.
ring. Once he's not on the lead, then Yeah. In any case, with all these thoughts, my advice would be, don't be within reach of the beast. Don't try and put a hook in his nose, or, don't try and lead him. Just don't be where he can get you. Mm-hmm. Probably a good idea. All right. Verse 3. Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? So my comments are, will Leviathan beg you or speak softly to you? Will he plead with you for mercy? God's sarcasm is all throughout Leviathan. Yeah, I can just see this Leviathan, whatever it is. He's not going to beg for mercy.
No, it'd be something like, oh no, you got me.
It'd be the other way around. You beg for mercy. Oh, and when we get there, one of the descriptions of him is he's hard-hearted. So forget it. You ain't getting mercy from him either. We talked about the score. Just hold that for a second. We talked about the scorecards. I didn't run down the different options, and this is not a complete list. So what we're doing with these scorecards is descriptions, and then we're deciding each description whether it fits a sea monster / serpent, a dragon, a dinosaur, a crocodile, a whale, a hippo, or some mythical, poetic type of thing. So as we go through, and that's not a complete list. I think I saw some others that just didn't make it to my list. So, go ahead.
In verse 1, in my translation, it says, can you press down his tongue with a rope? With crocodiles and stuff like that, it's pretty easy to basically tie up their mouth with a rope because they don't have a lot of opening power. They have a lot of crushing.
Yeah.
But you can easily tie down their.
When I looked that up, and I didn't make note of it, but one of the commentators said something to the effect of the idea of getting your hand in its mouth to tie its tongue down is probably not wise. That was is not closing which would be a good point though. It wouldn't be a crocodile because
What we witnessed when we were at Gatorland.
yeah,
They wrap something
with
around-
electric tape,
Yeah, and so no, trying to reach in and get their tongue, I don't think so.
So that was what I saw in one of the commentators, but I didn't make note of that particular thing. All right, so verse 3, is Leviathan going to beg you? No, I don't think so. Verse 4, will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? All righty. So my notes on verse 4, will Leviathan agree to be your servant forever? Can you tame him for domestic use? Yeah. At some point further in the notes, there seems to be thoughts that, to me, somewhat clear thoughts that Leviathan's also a picture of Satan. Do you want to make a covenant with Satan? That often goes to, I frequently mention it because a lot of talk in Christian circles goes to, Christian unity. Well, unity is not the goal. Unity is the result of spiritual maturity. I can have unity with Satan if I compromise enough. Unity's not hard. All I got to do is compromise and agree with everything the enemy or my adversary says. Unity's easy. Godly unity comes as a result of spiritual maturity. We got two people who are separated. We get saved. We start growing in Christ. And, lo and behold, we start getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer till we get to the other side of glory. Then we agree on everything. But spiritual maturity results in unity. Unity is not the goal. Unity can be forced. All I got to do if I want to be unified with you is just agree with you. Compromise as much as is necessary.
I'm thinking, but even with mature Christians, sometimes.
Well, on this earth, there's always going to be differences.
Right.
Paul and Peter. Paul got in Peter's face because of compromise, and Paul wouldn't compromise. And you probably don't get a whole lot more mature than Paul and Peter.
Also, no one's perfect, so your lines may intersect and start going. If you're not
Right.
on
Yeah.
the line, you
Yeah.
might intersect and start going
Yeah.
opposite direction.
So
Yeah.
maturity results in unity. For example, I've known people who have parted ways, but they still get along. They're still brothers in the Lord. They still love each other. They still agree on all the essential things. They just didn't agree on something.
Right.
And like Paul and John Mark, Paul and Barnabas separated because Barnabas wanted to bring John Mark, who left the last time, and Paul said, no, we're not taking him. So Paul and Barnabas separated ways over John Mark. Later, Paul writes about John Mark and says, bring Mark because he's valuable to me in the ministry. So we know that Paul and Mark reconciled. Bible never tells us about Barnabas and Paul, but they're both mature. I'm sure they probably just, So God's in control. But in any case, unity is not the goal. That can be forced. Spiritual maturity is the goal. And that takes time and effort, and God's doing. Okay, thanks, Job. I'm not sure how we did that, but especially from Leviathan. Oh, I know, because he's a type of Satan. Okay, it's easy for me to get running. All right, so no, verse 4, no, you're not going to tame Leviathan. He's not going to agree with you. He's not going to make a covenant with you. So, Job, you can't make an agreement. You can't tame Leviathan. How dare you contend with me? That's what God's more or less saying. And that's the main point through all this. As powerful as Leviathan and Behemoth are, God made them. I like what my friend said. God reigns sovereign over it and can send it like a puppy to get his profit. Leviathan will obey God. Absolutely will obey God. He's not going to obey you, Job. So anyhow, on to verse 5. Will you play with him like you do a bird? Or will you bind him for your maidens? All right, Job, you going to play with Leviathan like a pet bird? Are you going to put him on a leash for your daughters? I would say
No.
Job wouldn't love his daughters if he tried to put a leash on Leviathan and let them walk him around. That would be bad.
I
Yeah.
just thought of something.
Yeah.
God said, would you put a rope on him so that your girls can play with him? But Job had lost his daughters.
Yeah,
already.
yeah.
God was adding insult to it.
Could be God was adding insult to injury. Could be God knows what's going to happen, and Job's getting his 3 daughters back. Well, new daughters, 3 new daughters, and 7 sons. 10, yeah. Yeah.
God knew what was going to happen in the future, but it made he's also kind of like,
Well, yeah. No,
testing
he's
Job like, is Job going to get mad at me for saying this?
well. By this point, Job is pretty much learning. He's the last chapter said, "I'm shutting up. I'm not speaking again." I opened my big mouth a couple of times. I'm not going to do it again. So Job is definitely learning, and God's not done with the lesson yet. So, that's right. Leviathan, you're going to put a leash on him. Imagine trying to put a leash on a T-Rex. Leviathan's worse than that. I mean, Leviathan's a water creature. I mean, so a T-Rex, if you were good at lassoing, and you might be able to get one around him, and you're not going to lead him around on a leash, but how are you going to do that with a sea serpent or a water creature or something? Anyhow, this just isn't happening. All right, verse 6. Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Make a banquet, one of the commentators, make a banquet. Parallelism rather supports, do partners in trade desire to purchase him? And some translations read better that way.
Because mine said, will fishermen try to buy him from you? Will they cut him into pieces and sell them to the merchants?
Yeah. So basically, are you gonna wheel and deal and do business with this thing?
Merchants going to be
Are
buying
they-
and selling Leviathan burgers.
Yeah. Are they? And actually, wait a sec. Did I not? I'll bet I didn't.
What?
Oh. There was something.
You can think about it and bring it.
Well,
next
no,
time.
it's the Lord slay the dragon that is in the sea. Oh, there it is. It is there. Psalm 74:14, talking about Leviathan burgers. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan. We talked about that in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. So God can take care of Leviathan. God can sell Leviathan burgers, but Job, you ain't touching that.
That reference.
Psalm 74:14. It's the second to last one on the bottom.
There's food, yeah.
I knew I had it there someplace.
Food for fish.
I knew I had it there someplace.
Yeah.
So yeah, are you gonna sell them to the merchants and cut them up and make meat out of them? Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't think so. All right, verse 7. Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? Unlike fish, you cannot penetrate Leviathan's hide with spears or harpoons, depending on what your translation says. So, this is the first reference to his hide is impenetrable. That's the first one on the list. I think the rest of them should go in order unless I skip it. His hide is impenetrable. Score your scorecards for what you think might have an impenetrable hide. And what it might apply to. Okay, so, I would say, well, just going, I'm not going to lead. You guys score however you want, but I would say on my scorecard, probably the whale and the hippo would be out because they got thick hides, but harpooning whales has been going on for, hundreds and hundreds of years. Hippos probably could be speared. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the guy trying it since I know they're extremely dangerous. But
quite fleshy. It's not like you got
armlets.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we haven't even got to those yet. So anyhow, no, Job, you aren't putting any spears in them, All right, so the next section, verses 8 through 11, God is infinitely more powerful than Leviathan, and you want to contend with me, Job? All righty. So I'll read 8 through 11. Be ready if you got a translation other than King James. I might ask for that later. Lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? Who hath prevented me that I should repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine. So God's the slap down continues. God is really putting Job in his place. I like verse 8. Somebody got a non-King James verse 8?
Yes. Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, go ahead, Job. Put your hand on him. You will remember the battle. And you will never do it again if you survive. Put your hand on him. You're going to remember the battle, and you will know better than to try that again. One of the commentators, if you lay your hand on him, you have reason ever to remember the event, and thou wilt never try it again. One of the commentators. Verse 9. And
also, with that kind of also rules out the crocodile, because people have been able to put their hands on crocodiles and not worry.
Yeah. Do I have that on here? Nope. So you can make a note of that. Like
touching a crocodile is more risky than touching an alligator, but
yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean,
but I've seen a video of this alligator. I think it was on a golf. No, it might have actually been a crocodile. It looked more like a crocodile, and it was up on the golf course, and someone just walked up and then smacked its tail to get it to go off the golf course.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah. So I mean. Crocodile, which is one of the more popular opinions as to what the Leviathan is. It doesn't happen to be my opinion, but it's one of the more popular ones. Doesn't make sense to me, some of these descriptions as we get further into them. But, you choose for yourself. Just don't miss the main point that, Job, you got no business challenging God. You can't hold a candle to Leviathan, and Leviathan will jump at God's bidding. So, And if it is a type of Satan, when Satan's at the beginning of the book of Job, Satan standing in the presence of God, I just imagine him standing at attention. He doesn't say a word until God asks him a question, and then he snaps with an answer. I can see Satan just standing at attention. God asks him a question. Sir, yes, sir. Satan's he's under God's thumb. He's under God's control. And so anyhow, so is Leviathan. All right. So,
attention or cowering, trying to disappear into the...
Well, the image I get is, at the beginning of Job, when we talked about this, the image I get is the angels and Satan. He's not grouped in as the sons of God. It says, and Satan also was present. And basically the image I get is they're coming to give a report. So, but whatever the purpose is, Satan, he will either, like Andrew said, cower and hope not to be noticed, or stand at attention and snap to when God gives a command. So anyhow, verse 9, any man who hopes to take on Leviathan is hoping in vain, utter foolishness. They will be cast down. Yeah.
Now because mine says, okay, behold, your expectation is false. Will you be laid low, even in the sight of him? So I'm looking at being laid low like he's being looked down upon because he's smaller.
Possibly.
That's how I.
Yeah, when I looked that one up, for some reason I didn't paste it into my notes, but when I looked it up, that cast down basically by definition had something to do with utter fear. It's like So whatever, I certainly envision Leviathan as being a very large animal. I wouldn't say that there's enough to say it's bigger than Behemoth. I wouldn't say that, but it's probably not.
Probably larger than the dinosaur.
Yeah, it could be definitely larger than a dinosaur. I don't know. There's nothing.
I guess it probably wouldn't be super large because, bodies of water, unless like the ocean, obviously.
Yeah,
but most bodies of water are kind of a bit confining. Spaces, and so they're not lots of seas aren't super deep and super large.
So I mean, the one thing that makes me think Behemoth was bigger than Leviathan in size is the one description that we looked at last week that kind of pointed that it was the largest of God's creations. Right. So that's the only thing that, I think I get a picture both of them are pretty big, and I would not want to be meeting one on the same side of a very powerful fence, So don't think I'd really want to be on the other side of a very powerful fence, but that may just be because I saw Jurassic Park back in the day, so anyhow, all right. So you'll be terrified. If you hope to take on Leviathan, you're a fool, basically, is the summary of that verse. Verse 10, none is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? If no one is brave enough to confront Leviathan, who are you to confront me? Essentially what Job's saying. And that stirring him up, I have a very small example. When I was in Africa, just before the end of our missions trip, we took a safari, and we were in this 15, 16, whatever, 20 passenger van with the roof that lifted up so you could stand and take pictures and whatever. And one of the things we did was we drove up to a resting, very large rhinoceros. This thing was the biggest rhinoceros I ever saw. And the few that I've seen in zoos, I would say were maybe half the size. This thing was huge. And the driver drove up close enough that it shook itself, and it looked like maybe he was thinking about getting up. And I'm like, dude, don't get no closer, because I'm inside of a van, but that thing looked like
Twice the size.
this bit, not twice the size of the van. It wasn't that big, but that thing looked like
You could talk
Could
with
push
you.
it.
this van was nothing.
It looked like it might be at least twice the weight of the van.
Yeah, maybe twice the weight. All I knew is just let him lie in peace.
Yeah.
Don't wake him up anymore. He shook himself. That was all the movement I needed to see.
We don't know if he's hungry or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just I don't want him angry. That's the main thing, you know. So, I mean, but anyhow, and that's just minuscule compared to the descriptions of Leviathan. Have we gotten to, oh, not yet. Verse 9. Oh, yeah, verse 9, he's fearful. Fearful to look at. So, second one on our list, check the ones that could be fearful to look at. All right, moving on. Let's see, our next one is verse 13. All right, that way maybe I won't forget one. All right, so verse 11. Oh, I like verse 11. Somebody without the King James. I got the King James. Who's got something else?
Who has been first to give me what I should repay him? Whatever under the entire heaven is mine.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. So basically, who has given me anything that I owe him a debt? Is what God's saying.
Mine has a footnote that says basically, like, the verse is reading more like, it sounds like God saying, I owe no one anything.
Yeah.
But the footnote says, no one has ever come near to Leviathan and survived, no one under heaven.
Okay.
That's the
That's quite
footnote.
different.
Yeah, that's a footnote.
So, like,
So it could be in the context of that. I would tend to think it's more God still speaking to Job. It says, who's given me anything that I should repay him? And the New Testament verse, which I didn't write down, says something to the effect of, it's very similar. Now I can't even remember. But anyhow, basically, we don't have anything to give God. He's not indebted to us. I owe you nothing, Job. You have given me nothing that I'm indebted to you. So again, on what grounds are you demanding an audience with me, Job? So far, I've asked you all these things. I've presented all these situations, and so far, you haven't been able to answer or perform any of them. And he's not done yet. All right. 12. Well,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was looking at mine, and it's Romans 11:35.
Okay.
It says, or who has first given to him that it might be paid back to him again.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Thank God for cross-references. Yeah, so, I mean, here, who knows? Paul could have been referencing this passage from Job. I mean, somehow we have tied it together, and probably many before us have, and that's why it's in that Bible as a cross-reference. But Paul very easily could have been quoting Job when he mentioned, or referencing Job when he talked about that. Okay, so verses 12 through 17, look at Leviathan.
Verse 12. Mine says, I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength, and its graceful form. Meaning God wanted to really emphasize this part, that the Leviathan, whoa, it's got really strong legs.
So it's not a T-Rex.
At least not the front two. I mean, so, but yeah.
also, this is just a little thing. It also says, and his graceful shape. That kind of makes me think a bit more like with the sea serpent thing. Because, like, more like, but,
Okay.
but it also
Mine's-
has legs,
no,
too.
it's graceful too.
Yeah.
Or at
Okay.
least limbs.
And
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure if it says here, but in some other biblical literature, it talks about the hide of the Leviathan as being so beautiful, as if it's like it's all colorful, but it's like, but the scales of it are all like by the way the light falls on it. But anyways, that's just extra thought.
Yeah, so I mean, there's, I think part of my problem with my notes is somehow they got cut off. I didn't format them all correctly. So I had looked up the word limbs, which is King James, I think, says, "I will not conceal his parts," and that. No, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I don't like it when this. Okay, my notes are not there the way that somehow they got cut off. So one of the commentators said, to strengthen the point made in the previous section that Job cannot stand against Leviathan, and so he's starting to talk. Look at him, look at Leviathan. His limbs, his power, nor his comely proportion or graceful appearance, so basically, he's powerful. He's got powerful limbs, and he looks somehow, maybe impressive might be the right word. Translations say, King James says, comely proportion, graceful,
or his mighty strength, or his orderly frame.
Graceful form.
Okay, so basically, he's well built, however you want to take that. So
he also is scary looking at the same time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where he looks like looks like whatever is being described here, and he's also scary.
Yeah, I mean, but that's not maybe uncommon. A lot of animals like German shepherds, they look impressive. They look well put together. But if you got one snarling with his teeth bared at you, they're also very scary looking. So you could have both at the same time. Now, what verse are we on here? No, that was 9 still. So we haven't got, did we do 13?
I think we did 12.
12, okay. So 13, moving on to 13, we're talking about, his impenetrable hide again. We'll skip that one. We already did that. I got it on here twice. It's referenced again in verse 13. Who can discover the face of his garment? Who can come to him with his double bridle? Wait a second. So what does 13 say in another translation?
Who can strip off his outer armor?
Okay.
Who can come with his double mail?
Okay. So basically, again, it's poetic commentary on you ain't getting past his outer hide.
Are you wondering about what mail means?
M-A-I-l.
Yeah,
It's kind of like chainmail, like
armor.
I'm thinking is what it's
Let's
talking
see, under the face, uncover the face of his garment. Hebrew bridle.
Yeah, bridle.
Like I think it's kind of like, since it's talking about like armor, I think it's like kind of referencing like chainmail or something like that.
Which is part
like
of
basically a bunch of rings armor of metal.
Chainmail is part of armor, like basically where the joints are, because it's more bendable, whereas
Right.
you don't want it bending on this part of the arm. You only want to bend it right there.
Right.
So that's where that word probably is coming into play there. Another image of the Leviathan's impenetrable hide and fearsome appearance of his mouth, which we'll go into more in verse 14. Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about.
Well, when I looked at that, it was like, what does that mean about who dares open the doors of its mouth? But then if it's got multiple heads, then it's got two mouths at least. So
Yeah, basically what I saw when I looked that up is no one can open his mouth and his teeth are terrible. So that could go back to your crocodile because like we talked about before, the closing power of the crocodile is where the power is, not the opening part.
Right.
So a crocodile could fit that one
Right.
by description. And again, we're not going to solve what this thing is. I just read from at the beginning 3 or 4 different theologians and got 5 or 8 different opinions. So it is what it is. Just don't miss the main point that Job can't deal with it. So yeah.
Also, where it says doors of his face, like obviously it's could like be referencing multiple heads, obviously, but like also things like crocodiles and other like reptiles and whatnot often have like special like outer eyelids and stuff like that, and I think some even like have ways that they can kind of like close their ear. Like I think crocodiles maybe have. I could be wrong about this, but I think that they have like a way that they can kind of close their ears for when they're going like in the water to like protect their like sensitive areas. So either if it's like a crocodile or some sort of larger, like especially if it was like a larger being, it may like if it's larger, it might have like larger eyes and larger ears, which would be much more easy to get things inside of, and so it maybe would have almost kind of doorway looking type of things that can close to protect those areas.
Yeah, it could. I mean, there's a lot. Basically, from what I saw, mostly everyone is saying it's just you're not going to open its mouth.
Well, that is a good point, though, but it's, I think, mostly talking about the
Because like with mine, it says open the doors of his face.
Doors of his face. Yeah, that's what
Right.
So
yeah, well the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the ears.
could
Although
be.
those are like the doors.
Could be. Could be. Yep. So, verse 15, his scales are his pride, shut up together as with a close seal. Somebody got something else other than King James?
Its back has rows of shields, tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between.
I think you read 15 or 16. For,
Well, they all go together.
Right, it says his strong scales are his pride,
yeah.
shut up as with a tight seal. Like
Oh yeah, I've got a footnote using the word pride.
So I thought
rows of shields.
rows of shields. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. So we did powerful jaw, teeth. So scales, rows of shields, armored. Basically, is the idea there. So you can pick which animals or things you think might look like it has armor plating, armored shields on it from your checklist.
I'm just going to quickly bring this up, though I don't really think this is a very realistic possibility. It could potentially be some sort of like a turtle, because a turtle shell, it's got kind of like these segments, but they're like all connected together, like sealed together with no space between.
Seal tight.
Yeah, okay. You can put that down here and use the one that you're not using for mythical or poetic.
Put turtle.
But also God may have had fun using all these different characteristics for all kinds of different animals. And he said, now I'm going to make this kind with all of these things. You know about the platypus, how it's part duck, it's part
Beaver,
it's
got
part
poison.
and
lays
it's like
eggs.
a combination of many animals. And God says, I'm going to make the Leviathan with all of these different attributes.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, snapping turtles are kind of scary.
Oh,
regular turtles
Like
are
it's mostly
not,
talking
but
about kind of the construction of the
Yeah,
shell.
yeah.
How it's like
but I
not
mean,
space,
the
it's kinda like
intimidating
armor.
part is like if the only thing I could think of was snapping turtles, but it's possible. Not like I said, there's no wrong answers here. I mean, like I said, we read 4 or 5 commentators and got 6 or 8 different opinions. So nobody's got the right answer on what Leviathan is, but every believer can come out with the right answer with regards to what God's, or right answers with regards to what God's saying to Job. So basically, verse 15 says he's very well protected. Verse 16, he's so well protected that not even air can penetrate his armor. Yeah.
Reminded what you said about the crocodile.
Yeah.
With his eyes and his ears.
Yeah. Yep. And I know the eye thing is true. And I think I heard about the ear thing too, but that they have like an inner eyelid and an outer eyelid, and
Like one's for in water use.
Yeah.
And then the other one
Like goggles.
is like
yeah, kind of like goggles. Yeah. Yeah, so that's all you want is a crocodile who can see you underwater. Probably not a good thing. Yeah, so anyhow, verse 16. So then verse 17. They are joined one to another. They stick together that they cannot be separated. So basically, this thing is super powerful, super protected. You can't pierce his armor. And Job, he's nothing to me, is what God's saying.
And God is having fun talking about this creature.
Oh, yeah.
He's really being lengthy about it.
Oh, yeah. He does the whole chapter is all about Leviathan.
Also, I'm pretty sure Job obviously knows about Leviathan, but I wonder if he's ever seen Leviathan.
One of the commentators said that he believed, and we read at the beginning, he believed that it was a real animal, a real beast, that either Job was familiar with or through oral tradition, information about the animal was passed down. So I tend to think Job was probably familiar with it.
But like I'm just
Like
curious
familiar
if
as
he's ever
in,
actually seen it.
He saw it.
Like
That would be my thinking.
familiar as in I'm standing on a hill like 60 yards away.
Yeah,
Familiar.
depending on how fast it ran, if 60 yards is far enough.
Of a waterside cliff, seeing it swimming about.
Yeah. So anyhow, I tend to think Job actually saw it because, God's using something to make a point. And if I had never seen a crocodile anywhere or an alligator, you're trying to impress or intimidate me with this animal would be like, okay, well, I know they exist, but I've never seen one, so
Yeah.
So I tend to think he probably had seen it.
One quick thing about verse 17. It says they, talking about the scales, are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. So I kind of get the feeling that it's like not like that this animal's not super lizard-like, because most lizard-like creatures, each of their scales are kind of individually growing out of the skin, whereas these ones are are as though the scales are all like connected to each other, that they interlock with each other, so that you can't pull one scale off.
And
Like a lizard, like many lizards and all that, have like kind of individual scales that like kind of stack over top of each other, but you can potentially rip one off.
yeah, and that would go to, I think, what is it?
The earlier one,
Isaiah's definition, or Isaiah's description of a serpent. A lizard is not a serpent.
Right.
So,
It's a reptile. Both of them are reptiles, but
yeah.
difference.
But
So-
also with the clasping together and them not kind of being individual scales also seems to go with earlier on. It said something like, can someone like peel away its like
Yeah.
skin or whatever.
Yeah.
Like if they're interlocked, you can't just like get underneath one and pull it out or something like that.
Yeah.
They're all connected.
All right. So I think it looks like I was going to try and do the next 4 verses, but it looks like we should probably stop now because we're a little after 7 o'clock by a few minutes.
Oh, come on. Verse 18's an easy one.
18's an easy one. I can. Okay.
That's the start of the.
Oh, gee, 18's an easy one. He sneezes light.
Flash forth.
Uh
Sneeze.
huh. Uh huh. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to mark it that we'll start at 18, but I'll just quickly read my notes and then it'll be a cliffhanger or a spoiler for next week. So
18 through 21, I guess.
yeah, 18 through 21 is the next section, and we'll talk about it next time. But by his sneezings a light doth shine, and his eyes are like eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and the sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goes smoke as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. Well, I think that could be a dragon for sure.
A dragon and a hippo.
Oh, that's for sure. So let's see. I'll just quickly read. It's not quite 5 after yet, so I'll read the commentary notes. Maybe we can knock this off for today, depending on how much we want to talk about it.
We
What?
need to talk about
Okay,
it.
well, I'll read the commentary notes and we'll start here next time. One of the commentators says, amphibious animals emerging after having long held their breath underwater respire by violently expelling the breath like one sneezing. In the effort, the eyes, which are usually directed towards the sun, seem to flash fire. Or it is the expelled breath that in the sun seems to emit light. So this guy is clearly saying it's not, a dragon. His thing is it looks that way. His thing is it looks that way. And it's poetic. I'm not saying he's wrong, but it's not quite where I'm at. Another
People
commentator.
can tell the difference between fire and some glowing mist.
Yeah. Another commentator, this description of Leviathan seems definitely beyond that of a crocodile, and leads other commentators to believe that God had in mind much more than a currently known species. So he's given room to dragons, dinosaurs, something that could be extinct by now. Another commentator, the eyelids. Oh, this one I kind of found interesting. Eyelids of the morning. Egyptian hieroglyphics paint the eyes of the crocodile as the symbol of mourning because the eyes appear for the first thing before the whole body emerges from the deep. It's kind of interesting little side note. Doesn't convince me it's a crocodile, but, kind of interesting. The last commentary, and then we'll go back to this next week and see what happens. This description of Leviathan seems to be more like what we would think of as a dragon. Curiously, the dragon motif is common across cultures and lands and may point to an actual existence of some creature of this type in prehistory. It may be to this common memory of this fire-breathing reptilian creature that God refers. So we'll talk more about it next time, but
Well, thanks for doing that.
I would say that certainly something to consider as we wrap up this one. Certainly something to consider is if cultures throughout the world and in long history past had no means of communicating with each other. We're not talking about sending a picture of Bigfoot to China, through text. But if cultures in China and cultures in England and cultures in the Americas all have stories of fire-breathing dragons or cave paintings of dinosaurs. How could people make these paintings, and they very consistent, how could they make these paintings of something that doesn't exist, that no one's ever seen, and everyone's made up? I mean, if I gave parameters to everyone here at the table, make up the drawing of a flopping ladle, we would get,
Without using our image designer.
no, because I made up the word. It doesn't even exist. So if I said that to everyone at this table and you couldn't work on it together, we would get 6, 7 different drawings of this flopping ladle. So if nobody's ever seen a flopping ladle, how would we get consistent drawings? It's something to think about, folks.
That also reminds
So
me.
anyhow,
That also
more next week.
on that.
More next week. Stay tuned. This is fun.